My name is Sierra Thompson, and I was 34 years old when my sister looked me in the eye and told me to find somewhere else to die. 3 days after our parents' funeral, while I was still using a cane from the car accident that nearly killed me 2 years ago, Victoria stood in the doorway of the only home I had left and said those words without a single tear. She had brought moving boxes, she had brought her husband, and she had brought a cruelty I never knew lived inside her. Our parents had just been buried. The flowers on their graves hadn't even wilted yet, and my sister, my own blood, was throwing me out of the house where I'd spent the last 2 years recovering, healing, and caring for the very people she barely visited. She thought I had nothing. She thought I was useless. She thought wrong. Before I tell you what happened at the lawyer's office 3 days later, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. To understand why those words cut deeper than any knife, I need to take you back to the day everything changed. 2 years before my parents died, I was a landscape architect with my own small firm in Hartford. I designed gardens for wealthy clients, restored historic estates, and had just landed a contract with the city's Botanical Society. Life was good. Life made sense. Then a drunk driver ran a red light. I don't remember the impact. I only remember waking up in a hospital room with metal rods in my spine and doctors explaining that I might never walk again. The surgery took 11 hours. The recovery would take years. My apartment had stairs I couldn't climb. My office had projects I couldn't manage. My savings had limits that medical bills didn't respect. So when my parents offered their guest room on the first floor, I said yes. I moved back into the house where I grew up, into the bedroom that still had my high school track trophies on the shelf. For 18 months, I used a wheelchair. I learned to navigate door frames and bathroom tiles and the particular humiliation of needing help with things I'd done alone since childhood. My mother read to me on bad days. My father built a ramp for the back porch so I could sit in the garden. Victoria called once a month, sometimes less. She never asked about my physical therapy. She never asked how I was managing. The few times she did call, if I answered the phone, her response was always the same. "Oh, you're still there. Put Mom on." Still there, like I was a stain that wouldn't wash out. What Victoria didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, was that 4 months before our parents died, I had started walking again. First with a walker, then with a cane. I was healing. I was getting stronger. But to her, I would always be the useless one. The Christmas before my parents died, Victoria came home with her perfect family in tow. Derek wore a cashmere coat that cost more than my monthly medical bills. Their 2 kids, Emma and Jack, ran through the house like they owned it. Victoria directed everyone like a stage manager, rearranging the furniture, critiquing my mother's table settings, reminding us all how things should be done. I spent 3 days preparing her children's favorite meals: homemade mac and cheese for Jack, chocolate chip pancakes for Emma. I did it standing at the counter with my cane propped against the stove, my back screaming after 20 minutes, because I wanted to contribute. I wanted to be useful. On Christmas morning, everyone gathered in the living room for the annual family photo. My father set up the tripod. My mother adjusted the ornaments on the tree. The kids fought over who got to stand in front. Victoria looked at me and smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Sierra, maybe you should sit this one out. We want a nice photo for the Christmas card." The room went quiet. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. My father stared at the camera like he hadn't heard. "It's just Victoria shrugged. The wheelchair doesn't really fit the aesthetic, you know? I wasn't even in the wheelchair anymore. I was standing, with a cane. But I didn't argue. I had learned that arguing with Victoria only gave her ammunition. So I smiled, nodded, and walked into the kitchen. Through the window, I watched my family pose without me. I heard the shutter click. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't know then that my father had watched the whole thing, and I didn't know what he did the very next morning. My parents died on a Tuesday in March. They were flying to California for an old college friend's wedding. A private charter, 6 passengers, clear skies. The plane went down somewhere over Nevada. They said it was mechanical failure. They said it was quick. I was in the garden when the call came, pruning the roses my mother had planted 15 years ago. The phone rang, and 30 seconds later, my entire world collapsed. Victoria flew in for the funeral. She handled everything, the arrangements, the flowers, the guest list. I was too numb to fight her on it. I sat in the front pew at the service and realized I didn't recognize half the people there. Victoria's friends, Victoria's contacts, people who had never met my parents but wanted to be seen paying respects. 3 days after we buried them, Victoria asked to speak with me privately. She found me in the living room, surrounded by sympathy cards I couldn't bring myself to open. She didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, Derek hovering behind her like a shadow. I've spoken with the lawyer, she said. Everything goes to me. The house, the accounts, everything. I looked up. What lawyer? The lawyer? She waved her hand dismissively. Mom and Dad's estate attorney. He confirmed it. Did he give you documents? A copy of the will? Victoria's eye twitched, just slightly. I don't need to show you anything. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. Something cold settled in my stomach. Victoria had said the lawyer. Not a name, not a firm, just the lawyer. My parents had used Harold Whitmore for over 20 years. If Victoria had actually spoken to him, she would have said his name. She was bluffing. That night, I sat alone in my parents' study and took inventory of my life. No job. I had closed my firm 18 months ago when the medical bills made it impossible to keep the lights on. No savings. What little I had went to copays, specialists, and the endless parade of prescriptions that kept my spine from seizing up. No income. Disability payments covered the basics, barely. And now, apparently no home. I looked around the room. My father's desk, worn smooth by 40 years of use. My mother's reading chair, the fabric faded where she always rested her head. The window that looked out over the garden we had built together, her planting, me designing, both of us dreaming about what it could become. This house wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. This was where I took my first steps, where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where my mother taught me to cook and my father taught me to argue. Every room held a memory. Every corner held a piece of my parents. If I walked away now, I wouldn't just lose a house. I would lose them all over again. And worse, I would be proving Victoria right. I would be accepting that I was useless, that I didn't deserve to be here, that I was worth nothing. I couldn't accept that. I wouldn't. I started opening drawers, looking for something, anything, a clue that Victoria was wrong. In the bottom drawer of my father's desk, beneath old tax returns and faded photographs, I found a business card. Harold Whitmore, estate attorney. I turned it over. On the back, in my father's careful handwriting, were 6 words. Call him. He knows everything. My father never wrote notes. Never. So why this one? 3 days later, Victoria came back. I was in the living room, practicing my walking without the cane. The physical therapist said I was ready to try. I wanted to prove I could do something on my own. The front door slammed open. Victoria walked in carrying cardboard boxes, Derek trailing behind with more. She dropped them at my feet, the hollow thud echoing through the room. "Pack your things," she said. "You have until Friday." "Victoria, I need more time. I'm still—" "Still what? Still pretending to be sick?" "I was in a car accident. You know that. 2 years ago." She kicked one of the boxes toward me. "You've milked it long enough." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Honey, maybe we should—" "Stay out of this, Derek." Behind me, I heard Rose, the nurse who had cared for my parents in their final months, come in from the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes wide. Beside her stood Maggie, our neighbor of 40 years, who had come to drop off a casserole. They both heard what came next. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp. She looked at me the way you look at garbage that needs to be taken out. "Find somewhere else to die," she said. "You're useless now." The words hung in the air. Rose made a small sound. Maggie's hand went to her chest. Victoria didn't even glance at them. To her, they were invisible, unimportant, but I saw Rose do something strange. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket and wrote something down. Quick, discreet, like she was noting a patient's vitals. At the time, I didn't understand why. Later, I would. Maggie was the first to move. She stepped forward, her 70-year-old frame suddenly rigid with the kind of anger that only decades of friendship can produce. She had known my mother since before I was born. She had held me as a baby. She had watched both Thompson girls grow up, and she had clearly picked a side. "Victoria Eileen Thompson," Maggie's voice could have cut glass. "Your mother would roll in her grave if she heard you right now." Victoria turned slowly, her face arranged in polite confusion. "I'm sorry. Who invited you into this conversation?" "I've known this family 40 years, longer than you've been alive, young lady. This is family business. I was family before you learned to walk." Maggie moved to stand beside me, her hand finding my arm. "Eleanor loved both her daughters, but she wasn't blind, Victoria. None of us were." Something flickered across Victoria's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or just annoyance at being challenged. Derek stepped forward, reaching for his wife's elbow. "Vic, come on. We can discuss this later." "Don't touch me." She pulled away, her voice rising. "My mother left me in charge, not her. Not some neighbor who thinks she has a right to—" "Your mother didn't leave you in charge of anything." Maggie's words were quiet, final. "Not yet." The room went still. Victoria's jaw tightened. She looked at me, then at Maggie, then at Rose, who was still standing in the kitchen doorway with her notebook. "Fine." Victoria grabbed Derek's arm and pulled him toward the door. "Friday, Sierra. I want you out by Friday." The door slammed behind them. Maggie squeezed my arm. "Don't you worry, honey. This isn't over." I wished I could believe her. The next morning, Derek came back alone. I found him standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who had lost an argument with his own reflection. When I opened the door, he flinched. "Victoria doesn't know I'm here," he said quickly. "Can we talk?" I let him in. We sat in the living room, him on the edge of my mother's chair, me on the couch with my cane propped against the armrest. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Look," he started. "About yesterday. Victoria's under a lot of pressure." "Pressure to throw her disabled sister out of her dead parents' house?" He winced. "It's not personal, Sierra. We just really need the money." I went very still. "Need? The house alone is worth—" He stopped, caught himself. "I mean, the estate should be settled quickly, for everyone's sake." "Derek." I leaned forward. What's going on?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "We're in trouble. The investments I made last year, they didn't pan out. We owe a lot, more than we can cover." "How much?" He looked at the ceiling, at the floor, anywhere but at me. 400,000, give or take. The number hung between us like smoke. "The bank is threatening to take our house," he continued. "The kids' school is asking about next semester's tuition. Victoria's trying to hold everything together, but Derek." Victoria's voice, sharp as a blade, came from the doorway. We both jumped. I hadn't heard her car pull up. "What are you doing here?" She grabbed his arm, her knuckles white. "Let's go, now." Derek mouthed something at me as she dragged him out. It might have been sorry. It might have been help. I know what some of you might be thinking right now. Why didn't you fight back, Sierra? Why didn't you say something? I asked myself the same question. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the best response isn't a response at all. If you've ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you, type "I know" in the comments. And if you're curious what happened at the lawyer's office 3 days later, keep watching. Now, back to the story. That evening, I found the business card again. Harold Whitmore, estate attorney. The handwriting on the back seemed to glow under the desk lamp. Call him. He knows everything. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang twice. Then a voice, deep and measured. "Whitmore Law Office." "Mr. Whitmore? This is Sierra Thompson, Robert and Eleanor's daughter." A pause, then warmer. "Miss Thompson, I've been waiting for your call." Something in his tone made me grip the phone tighter. "You have? Your father told me you would reach out. He was quite confident about it, actually." Papers rustled in the background. "I understand your sister has been making claims about the estate. She says everything goes to her. She says you confirmed it." A dry laugh. "I haven't spoken to Victoria since your parents' anniversary party 3 years ago. She certainly hasn't contacted my office." The relief that flooded through me was almost dizzying. So she's lying. "I wouldn't presume to characterize your sister's statements. What I can tell you is that your parents were very specific about their wishes." He paused. "Very specific, Miss Thompson. What does that mean, that?" "It means I'd like you to come to my office before the official reading. There are aspects of the will that require context." Another pause, longer this time. "Things that no one else knows, not even your sister." I wrote down the appointment time with shaking hands. "Miss Thompson?" His voice softened. "Your father changed his will 6 months ago, right after Christmas. He told me he finally saw things clearly. The Christmas photo, the one I wasn't in. He had been watching after all. The day before the official will reading, Rose came to say goodbye. She stood on the porch with a cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders, looking smaller than I remembered. For 8 months, she had been a fixture in this house, taking my parents' vitals, managing their medications, sitting with my mother through the long nights when the pain kept her awake. Now her job was done, and she was moving on to another family, another patient, another ending. "I wanted to give you something," she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a leather-bound notebook, worn soft at the edges. I recognized it immediately. My mother's handwriting covered the visible page, her looping cursive, the way she always pressed too hard with the pen. "Your mother asked me to keep this safe." Rose pressed the notebook into my hands. "She said you'd need it someday. She said you'd know when." I traced my mother's initials on the cover. "What's in it?" Her thoughts, her days, her observations. Rose hesitated. The last few pages are about you and your sister. I didn't read them. It wasn't my place. But I think she wanted you to understand something. Understand what? Rose glanced toward the street, as if checking that we were alone. There's something else. With Mr. Whitmore. Your mother recorded a message a few months ago. A video. She met my eyes. She was very clear about when it should be played. My throat tightened. Rose, why are you telling me this? She reached out and squeezed my hand. Your mother knew, Sierra. She knew what Victoria would do, and she prepared. Rose stepped back toward her car. Your parents loved you both, but they weren't blind. The notebook felt heavy in my hands, like a promise, like a warning. Victoria organized the memorial reception like she organized everything, expensively and without consulting anyone. The restaurant was Italian, upscale, the kind of place with cloth napkins and waiters who introduced themselves by name. She had rented out the private dining room, arranged for catering, sent invitations on cream-colored cardstock with my parents' names embossed in gold. She hadn't asked me about the menu. She hadn't asked me about the guest list. She hadn't asked me anything at all. I arrived late. My taxi had gotten stuck in traffic, and walking from the parking lot with my cane took longer than I'd planned. By the time I reached the entrance of the private room, Victoria was already standing at the head of the long table, a glass of wine in her hand, giving a speech. 40 people sat before her. Aunts and uncles I barely recognized. Friends of my parents whose names I'd forgotten. Derek's business associates. Victoria's book club. A sea of faces, some grieving, most just there to be seen. Worked their whole lives for this family, Victoria was saying. Her voice carried that particular pitch she used when she wanted people to admire her. And I promise to honor that legacy, this house, this community, everything they built, I will protect it. She said this family like a claim, like a deed of ownership. I stood in the doorway, and not one person in that room acknowledged me. Mom and Dad would be so proud of what we've accomplished, Victoria continued. The Thompson name will endure. I'll make sure of it. I gripped my cane until my knuckles went white. She hadn't mentioned me once. Not once. It was as if I had already been erased from the family she was so determined to protect. Someone in the crowd noticed me standing there. A murmur rippled through the room. Heads turned. Victoria's speech faltered for just a moment before she recovered with a practiced smile. Sierra, you made it. The way she said it, like my presence was a mild surprise, an afterthought, made my skin crawl. I made my way toward an empty seat near the back, my cane tapping against the polished floor in the silence. Victoria! It was Aunt Dorothy, my father's older sister, speaking from the middle of the table. What about Sierra? Where will she live now? The question hung in the air. 40 pairs of eyes shifted between us. Victoria's smile didn't waver. Sierra has her own plans. She's transitioning. Transitioning to where? Dorothy pressed. Victoria shrugged delicately. Wherever she can manage. She's always been resourceful. A few people chuckled. Small laughs, nervous laughs. The kind people make when they're not sure what else to do. But they laughed. I stood there with my cane, feeling the weight of every gaze. Some people looked at me with pity, some with judgment. Most just looked away, uncomfortable, eager to return to their wine and small talk. Victoria glided past me on her way to greet someone at another table. As she passed, she leaned in close. I told you to stay home, she whispered. You're embarrassing yourself. I didn't respond. I remembered what Harold Whitmore had said when I'd visited his office that morning. Let her talk. The more she says now, the louder the silence will be later. So I found my seat. I folded my hands in my lap, and I waited. Victoria had no idea what was coming. Maggie arrived 20 minutes later, wearing black and carrying a look that could curdle milk. She scanned the room until she found me, alone at my corner table, pushing food around my plate without eating. Then her gaze shifted to Victoria, who was holding court near the bar, laughing at something Derek had said. Maggie's jaw tightened. She walked straight toward me. "Is it true?" she asked, sitting down. "What Dorothy just told me. Did Victoria really say you're transitioning?" I nodded. Maggie stood back up. Before I could stop her, she raised her voice loud enough to cut through every conversation in the room. "Eleanor and Robert would be ashamed if they could see this." The room went silent. Victoria turned, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice was ice. "You heard me." Maggie didn't flinch. "This girl," she pointed at me, "took care of your parents every single day while you were too busy to visit. She bathed them, she fed them, she held your mother's hand when she was scared." Maggie's voice cracked, but she kept going. "What did you do, Victoria? Send flowers?" Someone gasped. Derek stepped forward, reaching for Victoria's arm, but she shook him off. "You have no right." "I have every right. I was Eleanor's best friend for 40 years. Maggie moved to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "And I know exactly what kind of daughter you've been." The silence was absolute. Someone coughed. A fork clinked against a plate. Victoria's face had gone red, then white. For the first time, I saw something crack in her composure, something uncertain. Maggie leaned down and whispered in my ear. "I talked to Harold this morning. He told me what's coming. Just wait, honey. Just wait." 3 days later, I walked into Harold Whitmore's office on the 12th floor of the Hartford Financial Building. The receptionist directed me to a conference room at the end of the hall, all dark wood and leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. The kind of room where important things happened. Victoria was already there. She sat at the head of the table like she owned it, her Hermes bag positioned just so, her posture perfect. Derek sat beside her, scrolling through his phone with the desperate energy of a man who wanted to be anywhere else. I took a seat across from them. My cane leaned against the chair. Victoria didn't look at me. Harold Whitmore entered with a leather briefcase and a court reporter trailing behind him. He was older than I remembered, silver-haired, distinguished, with the kind of calm that comes from decades of delivering life-changing news to people who weren't ready to hear it. "Thank you all for coming," he said, settling into his chair. "Before we begin the formal reading, I need to verify a few things." He opened a manila folder and looked at Victoria. "Mrs. Hartley, have you ever seen the complete will your parents filed with my office?" Victoria straightened. "I've seen the will, yes. It was in my mother's nightstand." "The document in the nightstand." Harold nodded slowly. "Can you describe it?" 4 pages, standard legal language. Everything left to me as the eldest daughter. Harold removed his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth. The gesture was unhurried, almost theatrical. "Mrs. Hartley," he said quietly, "have you ever seen the complete will, or just the summary your mother kept as a reference copy?" Victoria's hand tightened on her bag. For the first time, her smile disappeared. "What are you talking about?" Victoria's voice had an edge now. "A summary? That was the will." Harold opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document bound in blue legal backing. He placed it on the table between us. "This is your parents' last will and testament. 32 pages. Executed 6 months ago in this office. Witnessed by 2 of my associates, notarized and filed with the probate court. Victoria leaned forward. That's impossible. I saw the will. It was dated 5 years ago. It said, "What you saw, Mrs. Hartley, was a preliminary draft. Your parents kept it in their nightstand as a reference, but they updated their estate plan significantly before their passing." Harold tapped the document. "This is the legal version, the only version that matters." Derek's phone clattered to the table. He didn't pick it up. "This is fraud." Victoria stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood. "You're helping her commit fraud. She probably forged—" "Mrs. Hartley." Harold's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "I have been your family's attorney for 22 years. I drafted your parents' first will when you were 15 years old. I do not commit fraud, and I don't appreciate the implication." Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands were shaking. "Sit down," Harold said. It wasn't a request. She sat. I watched my sister's face cycle through emotions: disbelief, anger, fear. When she finally looked at me, there was something new in her eyes, something that looked almost like panic. "They wouldn't do this," she whispered. "They wouldn't." Harold began turning pages. "Perhaps we should let your parents speak for themselves." The room felt smaller, the air felt thinner, and I realized that everything was about to change. Harold read slowly, deliberately, giving weight to every word. "To our daughter Victoria Louise Thompson Hartley, we leave our investment portfolio, valued at approximately $14 million, to be held in a managed trust. Victoria may withdraw a maximum of $50,000 per year, with the remainder to be distributed to her children upon their 30th birthdays." Victoria made a sound like she'd been punched. "A trust?" Derek leaned forward. "What do you mean, a trust? We need that money now." Harold continued as if Derek hadn't spoken. "The document includes a letter from your parents explaining their reasoning. Shall I read it?" "Yes," I said, before Victoria could object. Harold adjusted his glasses. "We love Victoria with all our hearts, but we have watched her struggle with financial decisions throughout her adult life. We have seen money disappear into ventures that never materialized. We do not wish for our life's work to be lost within a year of our passing. The trust is not a punishment, it is protection." Victoria's face had gone from white to gray. Derek was staring at the table like he wanted it to swallow him. "Now." Harold turned several pages. "Regarding the family home and surrounding property valued at approximately $4 million. I stopped breathing. "We leave our home to our daughter, Sierra Ann Thompson, with the condition that it may not be sold for a period of 10 years. Sierra has been our comfort and companion through our final years. She has tended our garden, held our hands, and given us peace. The house belongs to her. She has earned it." My vision blurred. Somewhere far away, Victoria was saying something, objecting, demanding. But I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was my parents' voices, reaching out from beyond the grave. "There's one more thing," Harold said. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a USB drive. "Your parents recorded a video message to be played at this reading. They were quite insistent about it." Victoria's head snapped up. "What video? I never knew about any video." "That was the point, Mrs. Hartley." Harold connected the drive to a laptop, and a moment later, my mother's face appeared on the screen mounted on the wall. She was sitting in our living room, in her favorite chair by the window. My father stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. They both looked tired. They both looked determined. "Girls," my mother began, "if you're watching this, it means we're gone, and it means things have unfolded the way we feared they might." My father spoke next. "Victoria, you're our firstborn. We've loved you since the moment you arrived, but love doesn't mean blindness. We've watched how you treat your sister. We've seen the way you dismiss her, diminish her, push her aside. My mother's eyes glistened. Sierra, you are not useless. You never were. You are our quiet strength. While Victoria chased things that glittered, you stayed. You cared. You showed up. We changed our will after Christmas, my father said. After we watched Victoria exclude you from the family photo. After we heard her tell your mother that you were dragging us down. His voice cracked. We weren't going to let our death become another way for you to be erased. My mother reached toward the camera. We hope you two can reconcile. We really do. But if you can't, if Victoria continues down this path, at least Sierra will never be thrown out of her own home. The screen went dark. I couldn't see through my tears. But I heard Victoria's chair scraping back as she stood and walked out without a word. If you've ever had someone in your family finally see your worth, even if it was too late, you know exactly how Sierra felt in that moment. Type "finally" in the comments if this scene hit home for you. And for those wondering what Victoria did next, trust me, the story isn't over. The real confrontation was about to begin. But first, let me know. Do you think Victoria deserved what she got, or was it too harsh? Comment below. Now, back to the story. Victoria didn't get far. I found her in the hallway outside the conference room, leaning against the wall with her arms wrapped around herself. Derek stood a few feet away, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers to someone. A bank, maybe. A creditor. The people who were circling their lives like sharks. When Victoria saw me, something broke. "This isn't fair." Her voice was raw. "You don't understand. I have a family to support. I have responsibilities. I have... You have a sister you told to find somewhere else to die." She flinched. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." I kept my voice steady. "You meant every word. You've meant every word for years. You don't know what it's like." She was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Derek's investments collapsed. We owe $400,000. The bank is going to take our house. My children are going to lose their home, and you..." She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "You don't have anyone. You don't have kids. You don't need the money." I let her words hang in the air between us. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't have kids. I don't have a husband. I don't have any of the things you think make a person valuable." I took a step closer. "But I also didn't spend years treating my own sister like garbage. I didn't stand in our parents' house 3 days after their funeral and tell you to find somewhere else to die." Victoria's shoulders shook. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I remembered from childhood. Lost. Scared. But then I remembered all the years she made me feel worthless. And I remembered that compassion has limits. I could have destroyed her in that moment. I could have listed every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every time she made me feel like I didn't deserve to exist. I could have told her exactly what I thought of her perfect life, and her perfect image, and her perfect lies. But that's not who I am. That's not who my parents raised me to be. So instead, I leaned on my cane and spoke calmly. "You told me to find somewhere else to die. I found somewhere." I paused. "It's called home." Victoria's breath caught. "I'm not going to gloat, Victoria. That's not who I am. But I am going to set a boundary." I met her eyes. "You will never speak to me like that again. Ever. Not in private, not in public, not in front of your children. I am done being your punching bag." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I have a proposal," I continued. The trust gives you 50,000 a year. That's not nothing, but I know it won't solve your immediate problems. I took a breath. I'm willing to loan you what you need to pay off the bank. No interest. Reasonable terms. Enough to save your house and keep the kids in school. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. But there's one condition. I held up my hand. You apologize. Publicly. At a family dinner. In front of everyone who was at that memorial reception. You tell them what you said to me, and you tell them you were wrong. The hallway was silent. Derek had stopped his phone call. He was staring at me like I had grown a second head. Victoria wiped her eyes. And if I don't? Then you figure it out alone. Your choice. Victoria didn't answer. She looked at Derek, who looked at the floor. Then she gathered what remained of her composure, picked up her bag, and walked toward the elevator. Derek followed without a backward glance. The doors closed behind them, and I was alone in the hallway. Harold Whitmore appeared beside me a moment later, a gentle hand on my elbow. Miss Thompson, we still have paperwork to complete. I nodded and followed him back to the conference room. The court reporter had left. The video was dark, just Harold and me, and the weight of everything that had happened. He slid documents across the table, deeds, account transfers, signature pages. I signed where he indicated, my hand trembling slightly. Your parents were proud of you, Harold said as I signed the last page. They told me so many times, your mother especially. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. She said you were the only thing that made those last months bearable. I couldn't speak. She also said something else. Harold pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase. She asked me to give you this after the reading, a letter, just for you. I took the envelope. My mother's handwriting on the front. For Sierra. When you're ready. One more thing. Harold stood and shook my hand. Your father asked me to tell you that he changed the will the day after Christmas. He said, Harold's voice caught. He said he finally understood which daughter saw them as people and which one saw them as a bank account. I walked out of that office with the deed to my childhood home, $14 million in a trust with my name on it, and a letter from my mother pressed against my heart. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. 1 month later, I moved into my parents' bedroom. It felt strange at first, sleeping where they had slept, waking up to the same view of the garden that my mother had seen every morning for 30 years. But it also felt right, like they had saved a space for me. I continued my physical therapy 3 times a week. Most days, I didn't need the cane at all anymore. I was walking on my own, cooking my own meals, starting to imagine what a future might look like. The neighborhood had changed in small ways. People who had attended the memorial reception, the ones who had laughed when Victoria called me resourceful, now crossed the street when they saw me. Word had spread about the will reading, about the video, about what Victoria had said, and what she had lost. They were embarrassed. Good. Victoria and Derek sold their house in Greenwich for $650,000. After paying off their debts, they had barely enough left for a security deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in a town 40 minutes away. Derek was fired from his firm when his failed investments came to light. Something about unreported losses and angry clients. He was working at a regional bank now, a fraction of his former salary. Their children had transferred from private school to public. Victoria told people it was because the public school had a better arts program. Nobody believed her. She called me once, 3 weeks after the reading. Is your offer still available? Her voice was flat, exhausted. Yes. I'm not ready to apologize yet. I was quiet for a moment. Then I'm not ready to write a check. The line went dead. But she had called. That was something. It wasn't forgiveness, but it might have been the beginning of accountability. 2 months after the reading, I finally opened my mother's diary. I had been carrying it with me since Rose gave it to me, keeping it on my nightstand, sometimes holding it while I fell asleep, but I hadn't been able to read it. The thought of hearing my mother's voice again, even through her handwriting, felt like opening a wound I wasn't sure I could close. But that night, sitting in her garden under the stars, I was ready. The entries were mundane at first: grocery lists, doctor's appointments, notes about the weather and which plants were blooming. My mother had always been a practical woman, even in her private thoughts. Then I reached the last 10 pages, about Victoria. I love my eldest daughter, but I worry for her. She chases something she can never catch: approval, success, the appearance of perfection. I hope she finds peace someday. I hope she realizes that what she has is enough. About me, Sierra doesn't know how much she saved us. After the accident, when she moved home, I thought I was taking care of her, but she was taking care of us. Just by being here, making breakfast, reading to me, sitting with Robert in the garden, she saved us from a loneliness I didn't know we were drowning in. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before the accident. Sierra is my mirror, patient, quiet, strong in ways nobody notices until it's too late. I should have told her more often. I should have said the words out loud instead of just writing them here. If you're reading this, Sierra, know this: you were never useless. You were everything. I closed the diary and looked up at the sky. The tears came, but they were different this time. They weren't grief. They were release. 6 months after my parents' death, I returned to work, part-time at first, consulting for a landscape design firm in Hartford. Small projects, nothing too demanding, but it felt good to use my skills again, to see something beautiful grow from nothing. My first real project was the garden behind my parents' house. My mother had planted roses, hydrangeas, a small vegetable patch that had gone wild in the months since she'd been able to tend it. I redesigned the whole thing, kept her roses, added new pathways, built a small bench where I could sit and remember. It was the first thing I'd created since my accident. It wouldn't win any awards, but it was mine. It was home. Victoria sent a letter 4 months after the will reading. Not a phone call, not a visit, a letter. I've been thinking about what you said, about what I said, about all of it. I'm not ready to apologize in front of everyone. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I want you to know that I'm trying to understand why I became this person. And I'm sorry, even if I can't say it out loud yet. I'm sorry. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in my desk drawer next to our mother's diary and our father's business card. It wasn't the apology I'd asked for. It wasn't public. It wasn't accountability. But it was something. We weren't close after that. We probably never would be. But we could be in the same room without pretending the other didn't exist. We could exchange birthday cards. We could, maybe, build something new. My name is Sierra Thompson. I was told I was useless. I was told to find somewhere else to die. I found home instead. If Sierra's story reminded you that your worth isn't defined by what others think of you, I want to hear from you. Type "boundaries matter" in the comments if this resonated with you. And if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, share your story below. I read every single comment. If you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.